All right. Hello and welcome to Evolving Enneagram's Interspiritual Podcast. I'm Reverend Nhien, founder of Evolving Enneagram, and I am so excited to be in the midst of this Transformation by Type interview series in which I'm interviewing Enneagram professionals, not about the work they do, although that's going to inevitably be included here, but about their personal journeys with the Enneagram. So I am so delighted and honored to have Michael Naylor here with us. He identifies as a type 4. We'll get to hear about his journey of discovering that in a second. But I want to just open by sharing that Michael is the CEO of, well, I call it Enneagram Maine. If you can give me the full words, Enneagram Transformational. Basically, you are the Enneagram in Maine, the state of Maine is my understanding. And also the recent author of really the seminal book on the Enneagram and addiction. So I'm so grateful to have you here today. We'll put all info about how people could reach you in the show notes, so that we can just delve into our personal stories. But first, hello, Michael.
Hi.
So
Hi.
good to have you here.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
to be with you here.
yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. So how my understanding of how we first met is that I found you and your work around addiction as I was really earnestly questing for support along my journey. I don't even know how many years ago it was. I think it was 2015, I believe. So a few years back.
Mhm.
And I found it very supportive at the time. You very clearly guessed that I was a 3, and I did not know that yet. And despite being a longtime Enneagram teacher, I was still thinking I was a 1. I have a lot of oneness in me, but I
Yeah.
remember that distinctly. And
Oh.
so thank you for not, I mean, a lot of teachers will bombard you with their sense of who you are rather than letting you take that journey yourself. And I want to honor your
Yeah,
wisdom in letting me take that journey on my own, right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's sort of a fundamental principle that I was taught by Russ and Don, and because mistakes are made, and so
Yes.
and you got to it yourself. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I also want to credit you. This is very important to your work as well. I think even though I've taught it for years now, it struck me as I was pondering this interview that you're the first person who taught me the notion of focusing on our blind spot, on
Oh.
the Enneagram instinctual stacking. So I just
Hmm.
want to honor what a big, major role that has played not only in my personal life, as I navigate my self-preservation blind spot, and really have found grounding around that, and then have also shared that with my community and my students. I mean, really starting with you. So two
Oh.
things that I don't know that I've ever really spoken out loud to you to thank you for. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you. That's all channeling Russ and Dawn. So it's just nice to be able to pass on a teaching that I have found really important. Sometimes it has been overlooked out in the world, but it's certainly as a blind spot self-pres really important for me to know about.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Well, speaking of which, in terms, I've always been curious. I don't think I've ever learned what your stacking is, but I want to just start with, you mentioned Russ, Don Riso and Russ Hudson, some of the preeminent, teachers in the Enneagram, of which I would include you in that mix of master teachers here today.
Mhm.
I'd love to know first how you met the Enneagram, and yeah, we'll start there. Like how you met the Enneagram.
Well, in 1996, when my life was being nuked down to nothing, I had a therapist who said to me, Michael, you might want to read this book, Personality Types, and look at the type 4.
Mm,
And, uh, and I read it, and I was shocked and horrified that Dawn had somehow articulated the nuances of my own inner turmoil. and and it, it was really quite a shock because I was 15 years sober at that point, and although working hard, to live a life of integrity, the Enneagram just sort of opened up this whole other layer of stuff. It was like somebody went down in my basement and had a flashlight and started,
Oh,
poking around and went,
no one should do that.
oh my God. And
Oh.
my story about being an advanced recovering person disappeared very quickly, and
Wow.
really brought me to my knees, which was good. It was a good dropping to my knees, and
Mm,
but that's how I started. And I remember my therapist, who has been my grief teacher also.
mm,
I said, is this work? Because in the grief work, there's a lot of mm, sort of anti-Enneagram
mm,
um, passion. And I said to him, is this the real deal? Is this real? Do you trust it? He said, absolutely,
wow.
absolutely. And so he pointed me in the direction of Russ and Dawn, and in the meantime, I then started doing grief work and working with him and learning more and more and more about becoming right-sized
Mm,
and on the level playing field with everyone. And it was in 2002, I went to a part one, and Russ was teaching,
mm,
and I just felt an instant affinity with him. And I just, something just went off, a big yes in my heart and soul. And I remember talking to him at the break, and I said, I don't know, but I love what you're doing up here. And he says, well, we're just starting a teacher program. I said, awesome, I'm in. And so I took, I think, 5 or 6 5-day, 6-day workshops in 1 year and become one of their authorized teachers, certified teachers. And then I did the uh, faculty training and became faculty. And so it just opened up. I think the thing that was most powerful is that was really, because Russ and Don had been involved in the Gurdjieff work. One of the fundamentals was learning to sense your body, bring your attention down into your body. It's similar to what Eckhart Tolle does all the time too, but there's this whole sense of um, that grounding your awareness in your body and learning to develop a stronger relationship with sort of the energy flow, energy body. Uh, that particular practice seemed to begin to settle the waters of my emotionality. There was something, it was like it created a container, a grounding spot for me, and I don't really know how it did it. Certainly, I have done, prior to, in the midst of this, I was doing 10 years of Jungian therapy with an awesome therapist who was helping me sort out my rather extravagant imaginations of life and really trying to help me notice when I was out there and not even close to reality, and when I was on the earth, and that I really needed that time, and so and that had been preceded by a number of years working with Zen practice and learning to quiet the mind, and certainly Pema Chodron is still one of my most trusted teachers, and so I had done a lot of work that kind of prepared me for all of this. So
mm.
that's where I got my launch with the Enneagram.
Wow, that's amazing. So what strikes me about your story in part is that you came to the Enneagram with a robust spiritual practice already, both from the 12-step recovery rooms,
Yeah,
right? And it sounds like from multiple teachers, including like Buddhist influences, Gurdjieff's work,
yeah,
and so one of the things that I'm curious about is then how do you think the Enneagram helped you to deepen in your spiritual work? Or, another way of
yeah.
framing it is how did your type invisibly provide a barrier to a deepening within that work? So whichever way you want to take that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what was so shocking to me was that Don had, and at the time I was reading the personality types from the 1996 first edition,
Oh,
so
wow.
Russ hadn't got his hands on it yet, and there were certain the things that Don identified was this sense of longing. The fours have this sense of longing that sort of come out of nowhere, and not understanding it can try to do a lot of external things to answer the question, like, what the heck is this longing? What am I longing for? What's this sense of emptiness that just seems to float up from the
Mm,
bottom of my soul? And is it just here to torture me, or is there some way to use it? So he gave me words to begin to notice these sort of invisible processes inside me, whether it was longing, whether it was my beloved relationship with envy,
mm,
out of the blue. Somebody's in front of me and I'm experiencing this envy movie about how they have something I don't have. And I don't even know them, but
mhm,
the movie is so strong, I believe it. And so I start to have a reaction and feel bad about myself, and then wish bad things on them. So, they're not so up above me, and, all these kind of quick things that would have me not feeling good about myself and distancing myself. So, there's a number of things like that. There's just because those particular patterns, for fours, there's kind of can be that sense of somehow I'm an outsider and I'm different, and that was I had a pretty big attachment to that. That somehow I was different, and on the one hand, a
mhm,
kind of rare flower that hadn't been discovered, and on the other hand, nobody special. And in the graveyard would be my tombstone that said nobody special, Michael Naylor, he did nothing. And so that pattern, which would just sort of come out of nowhere, allowed me to start observing and sort of developing more compassion for
mm,
myself, and actually not acting it out
mm,
as a reaction to the suffering, or beating myself up or beating other people up. And so, the whole practice of learning to be with envy and breathe into it and not buy into the movie and sense it in my heart, which usually would connect with a sense of emptiness,
mm,
not lovable, etc. But if I stuck with it, all of that would dissipate and there'd be a calmness that would come up underneath it.
mm.
So I learned how to investigate it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Profound. I want to name a few things that I heard. th- there's a piece in here that I think is so important for all the fours, listening here. I mean, actually, for anyone of any type. But what I heard in your sharing was somehow by recognizing type structure, that you made what was personal before, right? Like a personal identification, like this is me, like this longing is me. You objectified it so that it's outside of you. So there's a choice. You could see it, right? And yes, and there's a saying, one way I teach the Enneagram is I talk about this transparent lens. It's a lens through which we see the world that we don't, at least until we meet the Enneagram, that
Sure.
we don't see. Like, we
Yeah.
really believe this is it. This is the reality. You're like, you're watching someone, they appear to have a better life than you, like, so this is and so you don't want to feel inferior. So you might have some ideas about being special and better, and then alternating between being better and being worse. And all these feel very real
Yeah.
until you named it. You start to know that it's a movie, because before the four meets the Enneagram or other spiritual practices, they don't even know it's a movie, right?
Right. It feels like this is who I am, and
Yes.
and the movie's real. And so it's kind of like noticing that you're inhabited by these emotional forms and these thought forms that really create, that we identify as the structure of the type, particularly um, depending on what I would call undigested suffering. So uh,
Mm.
the more I did healing work and around my own broken heart, my own brokenness, and the more I did work on beginning to see the illusionary thought forms that came across my thinking center that I thought was real, and began to notice, oh, there's something useful, and then there's this movie. It's always playing. It's just the same thing over and over again, right? Uh, and I keep watching it. It's such a good movie, but it doesn't help me, right? And it's the same way like with envy. The envy movie, I learned to identify, oh, there's the envy movie, and how I would just be compelled to put my head in the movie screen and become a part of it. And I remember joking, saying, I've watched this movie 15,000 times. It's still a number one hit. I can't take my eyes off it, right? So part of it was really the more my heart healed and went through being able really to receive a loving kindness from people,
Oh.
that also calmed down the patterns, because the patterns, in my theory, is that they were all I had available to protect myself when I was just a little guy. So they just sort of happened based on what I was born with and the patterns I had. And but as I began to do the healing and really allow loving kindness to touch me and all of that, then the reactivity of the protective patterns quieted down, so they're less easily touched, and they
Mm.
can still be touched, but it's just not as often as they used to be.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and it sounds like there's a little bit more of a space. We think about the space of reactivity. There's an
Yeah.
impulsivity to the type that has yet to be transformed, right? Like there
Yes.
doesn't seem to be a space,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
you
press
know?
a button and here
Like,
they come,
wow,
right?
the
Yeah,
movie.
so yeah,
Like,
a lot of, I'd say a lot of spaciousness, which has taken a long time, a lot of
yeah,
patience with, in the Gurdjieff work, and this is true for, I think, all the traditions, is this idea, if I can learn to observe my passion, my reactivity, my fixations, without judging them,
yes.
Gurdjieff said that that's what starts to take away the hypnotic power of the patterns. It's just being able to see and be objectively with the pattern, as opposed to beating myself up so that it's like the story we always tell is, when I beat my patterns up, they just tighten.
Yes.
So if I'm going to beat myself up, it's recommended that I use a feather, no more than a feather, so I don't, have these things attached to me like Velcro. So yeah, so self-observation, learning to be gentle, and as my teacher would say, when you were a little boy, you did not sign up for your pattern of envy or being an outsider, or getting off into fantasies. He said that's got laid down in you, and so it doesn't help you to beat yourself up for something. It's a machine. Can you learn to unplug it? And when you don't, maybe you'll have to apologize that day, which is often happens. So anyway,
Mm.
that's kind of the deeper philosophy, I think, that really resonated for me.
Yes. You have so many helpful analogies here, I think, for those who are listening. First of all, I have a dear friend who's a Buddhist teacher, and he says he often speaks of himself like this form does this.
Mhm.
This form. And when you were talking about the machine, I felt like
Mhm.
there was the same thing of like, again, you're objectifying this thing that was once personal, making the subject object now. And so, yes, this machine could be turned off if you so choose, or you could plug it back in, watch the movie. I mean, but there's something about that, like not making it personal, right? Where
Yes, yes,
it's deeply.
yes. Yeah, one of my teachers said to me, if you think of your patterns when they get triggered as wayward children that just got hurt and they're running out into the street, it's like, Oh, just, bring them back, bring them to your heart, do, if you need to make amends, that's fine. That's just part of the trip. But, to start to see that they're not you. Your patterns are not you.
Yes.
And, so that helps a lot because I don't beat myself up quite as much as I used to.
Yeah, beautiful. And I would love to hear if, I mean, I know that these practices need to be embodied, but if you could speak about one of the practices that you do that help you kind of create this spaciousness, I would love to hear. Yeah.
Well, the one that's been most fundamental to me is, well, there's been two actually. The first one being, though, is, in the Gurdjieff work and in other traditions, I think Darwin Hart does this too, is just every morning I will put attention into my right arm and for a minute and sense the fingers and just notice where sensation is and just be with that. I'm not trying to make it happen. And over time, I noticed that my arm will begin to fill up with sensation. In the beginning, it didn't. I was just putting my attention there, and there might be a little vibration in the palms. But over the years, that has opened up. And then I go to my right leg, then to my left leg, to my left arm, and spending a minute or however long it takes to allow that sensation to really come online.
Mm,
And then I move up, from the bottom of the spine up through the trunk slowly and sensing what I can sense. And there's always some part of my body that, I mean, the spine is difficult to sense
mm,
for me.
mm-hmm,
Other people, it isn't. But that whole effort to, in a sense, bring my attention out of my head center into my body
mm-hmm,
and to learn to begin to cultivate sensation. Uh, Again, moving up through into the neck, the chin, the tongue, the eyes, etc. And then at the end, just really attempting to sense the whole field of my body, and then even sense, 3 feet perimeter of the atmosphere.
mm,
And that practice, I can't prove it, but it's done something for really grounding me. For just somehow it's, again, this is my theory. These things are so invisible, I always tell people, try it and see if it works for you.
mm-hmm,
This seemed to occur for me, but it seemed to. It's almost the story I tell is that it built in a kind of deep quiescence in at the
mm-hmm.
foundation of me. So then, when the waters of the fore are turbulating, which they love to do, there's something that holds them. So I don't get so identified with them. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So
Yeah.
and that and in the Gurdjieff work, that's what the theory is. And again, this is all theory. I can't
Right.
prove it. Is that the more I learn to sense my body, that there is a invisible thread that moves up to the heart center, to the head center, and then to the higher emotional and
Mhm,
intellectual centers, so that you have this moment where all 3 centers are coming online and the potentiality of being held and helped by higher essence becomes more available. And you know uh, I have just found that there's something about that that's really worked for me in terms of just having impressions come to me that really help in the moment if I'm talking with somebody or I'm teaching. And I often say that at my best, something a lot smarter than me comes through, and afterwards I go, I wish I could anchor that. I could I could make some money off this, but it's just afterwards I go, I don't know what I said, but everybody said it was awesome. So it's kind of like at an AA meeting. We often joke at an AA meeting when you have to speak. When I've really spoken authentically, I never can remember what I said, and it's like, what is this? So as my teacher would say, that's because it wasn't you. So just be grateful you got to transmit it.
yeah, yeah, fantastic. Well, I hear so much authentic humility in your sharing, that is very touching to me. That was really about, this is my experience, right? This is my life experience. And as I'm listening and thinking, oh gosh, the humility here, it reminds me of something you opened with, which is when you talked about first discovering that you were a 4, you said it helped me be right-sized. And I want to hear more about what that means to you.
Well, uh,
So,
so one of the things that I've really appreciated in the Gurdjieff work is they really work hard at helping everyone realize that they got the same stuff as everybody else. It might be packaged a little bit differently. You might have a better hmm, way of advertising yourself that looks a little shinier, but when you know the rubber hits the road, we're all really doing the best we can. And we're all very equal. One of the things that my teacher said to me several times, he said, "You have to understand this, Michael. I am not superior to you. We are equals here. And if you start to make me superior, that's just your personality playing a game on you. Because the truth is, as you get to know me, you'll see that I have a ramshackle personality just like you. And I've had to work really hard just like you to learn to drive in public." So he would say, you know, it's kind of like you got this car and now you don't dent it up so much. You know, you have a little more awakeness. So, you know, the experience for me is just really realizing that really whatever gifts I have always been because I've received so much from people. And just without the support of others, I would have nothing to say. I would just be up here going, "Oh no, let's talk about the Rolling Stones." But you know, so there's just something, you know, that's just I've just felt that deeply. You know, that I've been really helped. You know, part of the humility for me is, what do we say? Pride always proceedeth a fall.
yes.
So,
Yeah.
so I took some pretty intense falls early on, where I just thought I was, you know, I was under the illusion of the type 4, that I was unique and different than everybody else,
Right.
and so I had to hit the wall quite a few times, and you know, and that helped a lot too. I had people who lovingly picked me up and said, you know, you're just an ordinary fool like us, so welcome to the game, and you'll fall again, and
Yeah.
that's okay. That's lawful. You learn something every time, and you know, just relax and let's just stay present today as best you can. So you know, I had a lot of wake up calls, so to speak.
So hitting the wall.
Just, yeah, it was,
So,
yeah,
so
really.
that's great. No,
Yeah.
it's good to know. And you've reminded me of a core reason why I wanted to do this series, which is that, especially in threeness, right? There is this appearance from the outside for those who might even encounter me in this moment or this season of my life, or in a day when I happen to look good, better than another day. And they're like, oh, whoa, and compare themselves. I'm like, if you only knew. Like,
That's
if you only
right.
knew. I'm like, well, we should tell people. We should tell people
I
what it's
agree.
like
This,
behind the scenes.
yeah, just,
you know?
well, you know, the thing that my teacher would say, he says, you know, here's the problem with the spiritual path. The longer, the more wisdom you accumulate, the better your bullshit is when you're in a tough spot. And you'll fool yourself. It's so good. He says that's why you must keep at least 3 people in your life who know you and can signal to you when you're, you know, flaring up and in your wisdom package, and acting as if you know what's going on. And
Mhm.
I, you know, there's a lot of truth. And my wife would say, especially my daughter would say, "Yeah, your bullshit's really good, but I spot it, don't I?" And I said, "Yes, you do." So you know, it's all a part of the journey.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So yeah, I'd love to hear, well, you're offering so much wisdom right now for this journey. I'd love to hear any stories that you would like to share, concrete examples of hitting a wall, like, so
Well, what do
meeting
we?
God, whichever whichever direction you want to go in that. Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I think the the first one of them that was really shocking was, as a type 4, when I first came into recovery, I had this story that somehow I was picking up on the wisdom of the 12 step much quicker than everybody else. And that I was just more conscious. I was like, I'm emotionally evolved. And when I met the Enneagram through Don Riso and started seeing my illusions, it was shocking. Like, oh my God, I've been telling my self-image story was this advanced, sensitive person uh, that, just got a bad break and lives on planet Earth and hasn't been discovered yet, and didn't realize that all of my illusions were really causing my suffering and giving fuel to that story. So there was something about just sort of like having that story sort of taken off my mask and going, oh my God. And then from there, of course, it got worse in terms of just seeing, I remember my sponsor said to me, well, this was like 15 years sober. I was working with a Zen teacher. I said, I don't know, but it seems like I'm apologizing more than ever. And he says, well, do you want the good news or the bad news first? And I said, well, give me the bad news. And he said, the bad news is that will get worse. You will see more and more how you're doing stuff that you didn't realize it, and you'll actually calm down as a result of it. And he said, but the positive part is that you'll start to develop compassion for everyone because you'll see how everybody's doing the best they can and can't see any better until they do. And he says, so a heart of compassion will be born for you and others, and you'll realize you're as messed up as the next person. And back then it's like, well, I don't want to be as messed up as the next person. I want to be an advanced troubadour. I mean, come on. And but that was not to be. Just not to be. That's not my journey. So
Well,
yeah.
amazing. Well, I haven't done this with everyone, but I happen to excerpt a passage from your own bio that you wrote. I mean, and not to elevate that superior ego here, but I thought this was beautifully written. So no, but to really invite you, I want to say that I know for me along the journey, especially in identifying as a 3, and we're both image types, heart types, right? There's something about how in the beginning others' feedback matters too much, right? But then isn't truly received.
Mhm.
And that causes that hungry ghost, right? The appetite for more feedback, more, reflection.
Yeah, you can't
But
feed it.
but the
You can't.
paradox is as we come into wholeness and healing, we actually also
Mhm.
receive feedback from others, I think, in a different way. And so there's like a nourishment, a genuine like connection
Mm.
around that, gift of say yes, and
Mm.
thank you. Yes, that is
Mhm.
beautiful writing, isn't it? Like,
Oh.
and to receive it because it is, and it says a lot about you, I think. And I want to read it. As a type 4 with a 5 wing, Michael, he would call himself a recovered type 4. This means that he spends less and less time in the swamps of oblivion, agonizing in the pit of holy despair over his horrendous longing for something he cannot name, less time being a hijacked by my emotions crashing on the next wave of feelings gone wild guy, and more often living in the depth of his heart and in the spacious crucible of humor and goodwill that he's been invited to inhabit. His family cheers for this, as do his guardian angels. He
True.
does, however, make short trips to the cathedral of his old patterns, but is only allowed 15 minutes there on any given day.
That's
Wow, right?
oh gosh, yes.
Beautifully put.
Yeah, well, these things happen. I unless I go, how did that get written? I don't know, but I like it.
That's
Yeah, but that really does capture that really captures the essence. of my journey for sure.
For sure. So tell
Yeah.
me then a little bit about this humor and goodwill. I mean, I've seen your face. If anyone, follow Michael Naylor on Facebook, and you will get jokes galore, right?
Yeah.
As well as inspiration. So yeah. So tell me about this humor and this welcoming of joy into your life.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be a side effect uh, of all the crazy places and things I've been required to address. But in the grief work, they often say if you can't laugh at yourself, then your personality is in charge. You're taking yourself too seriously. And and also though, that doesn't mean making fun of other people to get them to laugh. As my teacher would say, if you tell a joke about somebody and they're not laughing, it's not funny, Michael. And need to say, I'm sorry.
Ah,
But being able to, I think, I think there's something about fours that they see the pretzels they put themselves in and the stories that get created around it and the drama. And when you start to see it, it's pretty hilarious. Like, why did I do that? That is just so crazy. And there's something about, I think, fours tend to, fours in my life, when they're healthy, when they're
mhm,
not healthy, they're suffering terribly.
mhm,
And I know what that's like. And it's really a hard place to be.
mhm.
But I think something for myself, when I started to get liberated from some of my most painful patterns, there was like a celebratory joy that just started
Ah,
to come through. It just felt like, on a really good day, it just felt like like a waterfall of joy coming through my heart and just feeling so just happy to be alive. I think it might have been from hanging around one of my best friends at Type 7. I started to pick up on this
wow.
causeless joy going, whoa. But yeah, something opened up, and and it feels, I'm just grateful for it because it's a lot
Wow.
more fun
Yeah.
than, and it's not, it's in service for me of creating hope for people. There's
Uh-huh.
there's hope on this journey that you can get through these dark hours and these dark nights, and uh, one day at a time, 1 inch at a time. Keep showing up, asking for help, giving it your best, and the door opens. And sometimes, what do we say in recovery? Sometimes slowly, really slowly, and sometimes quickly. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, there's just, I guess it's a part of, you know, feeling a loving connection with people, and just there's something that just triggers humor, and so I'm just grateful for it.
Yeah, amazing. And I just want to highlight the term you used, for those who aren't as familiar with the Buddhist past, causeless,
Joy,
causeless joy, right?
yeah, yeah,
Causeless,
yeah,
not
causeless
having
joy,
any particular form or event or in the manifest or the material world, but a
yeah,
burst of joy as as part of the life force of
yeah,
part of life
yeah,
itself. Yeah. And
yeah,
the possibility that being available to you and available to all of us, right? Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to be able to have contact with it, and when it comes through, it's like, thank you.
So
I
excited.
don't know how it works, but I do thank you.
But as we say this, am a little bit curious about the suffering. I want to go back to that. So let's, because earlier, I forget the term you used, but there's this notion around suffering that is not real. Right.
Mhm.
I want to explore that because, there's a sense that a lot of fours, right, is like the deeper the pain, the more real. Like there's a connection to, like, even I've noticed in groups when people are sharing about what's negative, the fours, of average health in the group are more likely to be like, yeah, this is the real stuff, like, and
Yeah.
so a few things I want to say about that and ask about that. One is, so how do you think fours don't really suffer and therefore avoid real suffering that moves them through their suffering, right?
Well, this is I think is a complex territory.
Yeah.
Um, so the challenge for me, and again, that there isn't good data on it in the external world, but I did feel that my heart had been really broken as a little guy. A
Mm,
number of different things happened. Remember a beloved brother that I just adored
mm,
was suddenly killed. He was 10 years older than me. And
yeah.
it just shattered my heart. So it left me with just a feeling of grief that I didn't have the skills to digest. So that what would happen is it would, for me, would show up in moodiness,
Mm,
uh, or just sort of sadness that didn't have uh, an anchor or a structure. And so the way it would sort of circulate in my psychobiological self was if somebody said something that hurt me,
mm,
the hurt was real, but then I would replay it and
mm,
recirculate it, and it would just like I couldn't get rid of it,
mm,
and that made it hard just to navigate and be in the present and move my way through it. So ultimately, for me, you hear people say, well, fours need to not pay so much attention to their feelings.
mm,
I had to really deeply look into and feel my way through my suffering to
mm.
break that habit of recycling a past story or a past hurt. And as a type four, if somebody said something that hurt me, being creative, I would add things to it that didn't
Yes.
happen, but there it was. And I go, you
Yeah.
son of a gun, look, it's gotten even bigger in the last week. And but that was all in some ways a reflection of what I hadn't really digested on a real level, which was my heart felt really broken, and I had to really feel it. I think of things that I did to help me penetrate that. One was the Hoffman process I went through,
Mm,
which is really designed for the type four in all of us. Went through a lot of feeling, deep therapy, primal therapy. When it first started, I was like right out there on the cutting edge with everybody. But a lot of deep, breath work, but really needing to feel the depth of my suffering, so I wasn't taking it into and projecting onto people around me. So that's a tough one to sort out in the beginning if you're a four and like, where do I start? One school says don't pay attention to feelings, but I got these feelings, and then they go into my imagination. Do I just kill the feelings? And the answer is no. I think you got to get a good therapist. I think you got to get some good healers in your life that start to help you refine what you're experiencing. So I don't. So it's tough though. When you're in that broken heart place of a four, it's so turbulent, it's
mhm,
hard to know who's telling the truth. Like, who
mhm,
do I trust? And
mhm.
and I had to, I just really got lucky and met people that really saw me and helped me, just walk me through many many moments of getting clear about how to feel my suffering and let it go and not project it. So anyway, it's not a very good map, but it's what worked for me.
No, it's amazing. I think if anything, one of the themes that I'm hearing in all of your sharing is the theme of subtlety and nuance.
Hmm.
And that it sounds like there are these spiritual practices very widely available to all, different forms of meditation that help us to create a
Hmm.
spaciousness from, our reactivity. But in that space, it sounds like you have had support, and I think that even for folks to hear, pay more subtle attention to your feelings, right? Like to really parse out where, at what point is it what I might call legitimate suffering, right? The
Hmm.
point at which the feeling has an overlay of fantasy,
Hmm.
that then tells a story that
Hmm.
then recycles the feeling,
Hmm.
and perpetuates it to no end, right? And I
Yeah.
think to
Yeah.
to know the difference and to know that line is to become deeply attuned to your inmost self. Yeah.
Yes, and it's not anything you can, I couldn't do it alone. I
Mm,
needed guides to help me notice when I was slipping off and when I needed to drop down. And so because it's when for
we
me
lie to ourselves.
well, yeah, you're just in a dark forest. Everything
Yeah.
looks like, well, I don't know what to do with it until someone guides me or
Amazing.
touches something in me or uh, reflects to me. Oh, Michael, that story is a bit inflated. So let's see if we can bring it down to what really happened. It sounds like he got hurt, and there's a lot of
Oh,
hurt in there. So learning to kind of bring it down to right size, and then to feel it in my body, as opposed to having it get inflated and
yeah.
then just exploding the emotional center. But it's quite an art. I couldn't have got there by myself by any means. I needed a lot of really skillful, attentive, loving people
Yeah.
just helping me because there's often also a lot of shame behind it. Like the shame was really powerful, and and despair. So that's I think all of the different things that I did, like learn to develop quiet mind, helped me to be able to start to see a little more what was going on when the story was getting too big.
Right.
Um, So yeah, it took a lot of guidance.
Yeah. Amazing. Yes. So, Michael, it's just been amazing to speak with you today. And I feel like there's so many lessons here. But for those who are newer to the Enneagram, it sounds like, I mean, we've heard about that three prong, right? This important of Sangha or having a spiritual community. And what you just talked about was the emphasis of like having a teacher or having a guide, having someone to support you, whom you trust, who's safe, whom you can hear like honest things from, at least one person, if
Yeah,
not
yeah,
thousand and other things as well, and of course the third prong of that is the teaching itself. So there are these pieces, right? So
mm,
as we kind of come to a close in our time together, I would love to hear what advice or counsel. Again, I understand this is from your perspective, that you're not purporting to be like, this is the Enneagram message, but from my perspective, from my experience, strength, and hope, for the baby four, for the four who's just finding this and kind of like, oh, could the spiritual path with the Enneagram help me? Like, how do I open up to it? What advice might you have for the four?
yeah. That's I've pondered that question, and it's a tough one to answer. If you are if you're just discovering your fourness, and you notice that it's really hard living inside this world of your inner life. Um, I think my wish for someone would be to find somebody who can help you navigate and start to develop some objective understanding of what you're going through. So that could be a teacher, that could be a really good therapist, um, but somebody who cares for you, is skillful, and doesn't necessarily have an agenda about where you go with it, but is just there as a witness and trying to come up with some suggestions, like try this. So for me, I think I got curious about meditation and did that, and then I got curious about my emotions, and then did a whole bunch of whole long journey there, and then discovered the sensation. And it's in some ways it's like I would say, notice where your curiosity takes you. What's
Mm,
that the thing that's like, oh, I want to learn about this, and if you can, try to notice if you get caught up in that sense that I'm the only one who cares about this stuff. Because a lot of fours, when they start to learn, they go, I feel like I'm the only one on the planet. And my teacher would say, well, here's the bad news. 1 in 9 people is probably a four. Isn't that a horrible thing to consider? You're not the only one. And so there was something about keep looking and try not to get caught up in that sense that it's hopeless and I can't find my way and certainly and then just keep showing up, try anyway, that's what sort of comes to mind for me.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love, such beautiful advice. And I love also the theme that I hear in you, which is like, this is the bad news, and the bad news is the good news,
Yeah.
like consistently. Like the bad news is you're not the only one. And this is the good news as well.
Yes. Yeah. Well put. Definitely. Yeah.
So lovely. And as we come to a close, I would love to check in with you to see if you have a closing benediction, a prayer or a poem that you would like to share here. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do, and because this to me captures the predicament strategy pathway for the
Mm,
four. So it's called the guest house, which just about everybody on Earth knows about by Rumi,
yeah.
which some people have argued that he's a really evolved type four. Of course, all the type fours go, yeah, he's one of us. So the guest house.
Mm,
This human being is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
mm.
Hallelujah and amen. I think that's well put.
Beautiful. Thank you
Yeah,
so very much for
yeah.
your time, your presence, your insight and wisdom here today, your creativity and your joy.
Well,
Yeah, I've so very
thank you.
appreciated all of it. And yeah,
Pleasure to pleasure to be with you and yeah, just keep on doing our work.
working. And no, we're not alone.
Yes,
Right.
for sure.
Yeah, but
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
thank you so much. All right. Bye, everyone. And we'll be back with our next episode soon. Take care.